Hello everyone, welcome back to Just Another F1 podcast here on Apex Motorsport. My name is Richard Smyth and we've just had the Italian Grand Prix, the second event that runs the Formula 1 sprint qualifying, sprint race, whatever you want to call it. The second trial of that. We're going to discuss that today, and joining me for that discussion is accredited Formula 1 photographer Craig Evans. Craig, thank you for coming back for this podcast. Just very quickly describe the Italian Grand Prix weekend in just 3 words.
Oh, you keep putting me on the spot with these ones.
I know.
Oh, you keep putting me on the spot. 3 words. In the words of Fernando Alonso in, what was it, 2012? Lever da space. That's what I'm going to say.
Okay, yeah. And we'll see the reasons for that in a little bit when we get into that discussion. But I think we'll just jump straight into the discussion today, and we'll jump into the sprint qualifying, sprint race. I think in Formula 1 once it's called a sprint qualifying, so we'll try our best to call it that. But Craig, just did you think it worked? Because we see it at Silverstone, and I think the mood and the reaction to this one was slightly different.
No, I don't think it worked at all, and I think a lot of people are starting to see through the veil of an extra race on a weekend. But it's what I said to you, and I believe I mentioned it on the podcast when we spoke about Silverstone. I said, you take Alonso's great start from Silverstone out of the equation, was it a good race? And quite often the answer was, well, no one really did anything. And that's exactly what we saw in this sprint race here. We saw a good first lap with a bit of chopping and changing. And after that, I don't believe there were hardly any overtakes for position, were there?
There was very few. I think it's one of these things where everyone got so excited about the idea of a sprint race and an extra race, and now that we've seen it for the second time, it seemed to me it's a little bit unnecessary because it's just adding to an already hectic weekend schedule. And this is the first sprint race I watched as sort of a fan on TV, pretty much, because I was at Silverstone for the Grand Prix then. So I experienced it as a fan, and it was enjoyable as a fan, give more for the weekend, but as a viewer on the TV, it just seemed to be unnecessary, and it was like a start of the race, and I think the idea, and I can't remember who it was it Damon Hill, or maybe it was David Coulthard, I'm not sure which one it was, but they said that if you think it's like the first half of the race, and then once the checker flag falls, the race is on pause, and it's like the red flag's thrown pretty much, and they're restarting the grid for Sunday. It just I think it's starting to take away a little bit of the Grand Prix Sunday day by having a couple of laps on a racetrack the day before. It's just a little bit unnecessary. Do you agree with that, Craig, or do you think it has got some potential to work?
The thing I don't get is F1's main focus at the minute is reducing costs. So why are we running another session, which, this might be a bit harsh, but it's kind of pointless, because it very rarely changes the grid position from the quali, and it's just added risk. And if you have a crash, it's an extra. Well, I mean, F1 cars aren't cheap; they're not at all. But it just seems to be. It seemed to be an idea that looked great on paper, but now we've seen it in like actually put to the track. I just don't really think it works, and it doesn't advertise F1 very well. Because if you tuned in and watched the race on the Saturday for Monza, you'd think, oh, actually, there's not really much going on here. It's kind of just. It's just a bit of a procession. I don't think I'm going to watch tomorrow. I just don't think it does F1 any favours at all, really.
No, and if there's fans of the sport that maybe buy like a Sky or Sky Now pass, whatever, and they tune into the Friday night qualifying, and I like that idea. But then
I agree with that.
If they continue on to the Saturday, they see the race. Some people might think that is the actual race, because I think it's so confusing. Where qualifying, almost all but 3 races this year, and has been the past, is Friday is practice, qualifying is on Saturday, And for the fans who, more casual fans of the sport that maybe don't follow every race, they tune in and see cars racing on a Saturday. They might not tune in for the Sunday because they might not know there's an actual race the next day. Because
that's the other thing. It's this whole not calling this session on the Friday qualifying. Well, what is it then if it's not qualifying? Surely it sets the grid. Yeah, that's I don't know. It seems like a really strange way of reinventing the wheel when the wheel didn't really need reinventing. We saw this back in, what was it, 2016?
The knockout qualifying?
Yeah, with the knockout, and that was well, I think we all know how that went.
It was the best thing they ever brought into the sport. We all know that.
Well, besides Nikita Mazepin, of course.
Very true.
So, what would you do to solve the problem then, Richard? How would you? Because I think this is a discussion that F1 needs to start having.
Yeah. Because
it's quite clear that this format they've put forward, it doesn't really work.
Yeah, I agree. But the idea of trialing it, I think, was a good idea rather than just saying this is what we're doing from now on. And I think it needs to be trialed at. Well, I think one of the North American races, if they go ahead, is when the third trial. But I would like to see the Saturday stuff be, not completely different, but not relating to the Grand Prix. Have qualifying as we know it. The 1 hour session that sets the grid for the Grand Prix. If you want to then have a sprint race that still keep the 3, 2, and 1 points, but reverse the grid or give all the teams, new sets of tires that won't affect the championship. And if F1 want to pay compensation for damages or whatever, have it as something that's more for the fans of the circuit that are paying hundreds of pounds to go to the events to watch 20 cars race for 20-25 laps. That there's still points in offer, but it's only to 1, 2, or 3 points. It's not much, but it won't completely change and take away from the Friday qualifying, which we all love, and the Grand Prix itself, because you can't have qualifying for one race, qualifying on the Saturday, the same session for the Sunday's race, and then at different events just not have, that grid sets a grid for a race on Saturday, which they don't call a race, that sets the grid for the race on Sunday. It's so confusing. It's not helping casual fans. But I think if they brought it in where they kept the sprint race format for a couple of events, maybe 2-3 a year that changes every season, and made that a standalone event on the Saturday that did not count massively towards the standings, I think it would help, and keep the qualifying on the Friday night for the grid for Sunday, and don't mess with that.
The problem I have with sprint races is what do they add to the original package that we already had? Because the other problem with this weekend is FP2 is completely pointless because it's under Parc Fermé. So what's the actual point of running a differing setup? You've really only got an hour to nail down the setup of the car.
The FP2 session is just pointless. It
is pointless, and it's high risk, as science found out.
Yeah. No,
but I just can't see what the sprint adds, because drivers aren't gonna push. I just can't see a sprint working. Now, it's very similar to what you said. I think you keep the Friday qualifying. That works great. I like that Friday evening qualifying. That sets the Sunday grid. So that is pretty much as it was. And then if you want to bring in something exciting to bring in more fans, why don't we do a reverse grid on the Saturday?
Yeah, that would be ideal, but I know that's probably something that we'll never see happen in Formula 1 because of the way the politics work in the sport. But it works well in Formula 2, Formula 3, and different series. And if they do sort of take the approach of the GB3 Championship for the reverse grid, why not have points in offer for every overtake? Because that would encourage action a lot more, especially if you're in a title fight going down the back of the grid. If you can gain 13 places, 13 extra points rather
But
than.
then I think you have the problem of if it's a reverse grid, you'll have the teams at the front that struggle with pace moaning that they're not going to make overtakes. They're just going to be overtaken. Honestly, it's a real headache for F1.
Yeah.
Because now they've tried the sprint race, and I think you can unanimously say fans aren't fans of it, judging from what I've read on Twitter and what I've heard from different people who I've spoken to about it. It just doesn't seem to work. So I think something's got to change. What they change, I'm really not too sure on.
I definitely think it needs one more round somewhere just to see, but potentially with a slight tweak to the format in order to, because if these past two were trial events, well, you can change it and have a trial for something different, just to get it right. But I think it seems to be clear at the moment that it's something that they're not really thinking about pursuing full time. I know there has been reports of the Saturday race will be a standalone race that won't count towards the championship, but
then it comes back to cost.
Yeah.
What's the point in running it?
No, that is true. It is a headache for Formula One, and I think it's confusing for fans to work out as well, because it's a different format and the times are completely different than what normally happens, and the practice is all over the place. The idea on paper was good. In reality, it isn't, and I think that's the same for so many things in Formula One. I think it would just have to wait and see what. Well, I know there's a questionnaire going around for feedback from the Italian Grand Prix.
Yes, there is.
So it'll be interesting to see when the feedbacks, if we ever find out what information they got from that is, because Silverstone, I think, overwhelmingly it was positive for sprint races. It might have been because it was the first time, and it could have been and because of Alonso's performance, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if they can get it in for another race at some point this season. But something that did happen during the race, that the actual race on the Sunday, that is the Grand Prix, and something massive in the championship battle, was Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton both failing to finish. Craig, what do you make of that? The crash between the two? Who are you going to on air say who you believe was at fault or not?
Well, it's interesting because we were in the media centre at Alton Park, weren't we, when watching this, and then we heard everyone go, and our stream was a little delayed, so it was like, oh hello, what's happened here? And then lo and behold, the more I've seen it, when I first saw it, I thought Max 100% his fault. Now I'm not at racing incident, but Lewis definitely got his elbows out, which he's perfectly entitled to do. It is his championship to fight for as well. I think Lewis put the car in a position that was quite smart, because it was put in a position where Max had to bail out, or at least try to jump the curb. I think it's 80-20 on fault. I think Max decided to have a crash, and we saw, well, I mean, the thing that annoys me with these coming togethers, it's not needed. It's just, we saw it with, not being funny, turn 4, lap 1, Max runs Lewis clean off the track at turn 4. We see a couple of laps later, Lewis overtake round the outside of Norris, no contact, no fuss. Turn 1 later in the race, we saw loads of people go around the outside of 1 and cut back into 2. No problem, no fuss. These two come together, and there's always a touch. They always seem to touch. They always seem to be that kind of. I mean, I'm not complaining. It's turning into a fantastic season. It's Senna Prost stuff. This. It's going to be talked about for a while. But my personal opinion, Max made the decision to put the car in a position where there was going to be a crash. Even if it was, I don't think he expected to jump the curb and actually go over the top of Hamilton. But if had he not gone over, he would have definitely bumped Hamilton off or pushed him into the gravel. which is it's just we don't want to see it.
I think both drivers could have done more to avoid the crash, but both of them are racing drivers, and they both they don't want to run wide because the other person will then have a better, more of a lead going down the straight or whatever. They want to hold their position. They're fighting for a position, and the thing, Lewis is very good at giving drivers the space and respect going around corners, and we've seen that, as you said, with the other moves.
Well, Vettel's come out and said it, hasn't he?
Yeah, where Verstappen,
Sebastian Vettel's come out and said, I trust him solely when I'm side by side with him.
and that's coming from a 4-time world champion.
Exactly.
Yeah. Whereas the problem with Max is he sort of, I think the problem is with Vettel and Hamilton and stuff. They grew up in the era where there was that rivalry, but there was also the respect on track between drivers.
Exactly.
Whereas Verstappen is grown up in the era of it's the same group of drivers from the feeder series that has sort of moved throughout the sport with him, and he's used to racing against them. Where when it comes up against drivers who push the limits to the maximum they can without damaging their own race, you can see back 2017-18 when Vettel was battling for championships. You seen him and Hamilton, they were giving each other space, they were having great battles on track, but they were pushing each other to the limit, but they knew where the limit was, that both of them could continue in the race. Where you just are not seeing this with Max. I think if Silverstone didn't happen, the outcome of this might have been slightly different. I think Verstappen knows he's in the lead of the championship. If they crash, if they crash, they're both going out. He's done the lead of the championship, and I just hope that's not the mentality that he'll have going through the rest of the season, because he's losing respect with fans very quickly, and he'll have very little respect left if he keeps crashing purposely in order to win the championship.
The thing that I can't get my head around is, and I'm just waiting for everyone to bombard us with, Hamilton fanboys, no, we just want to see good racing.
Yeah.
It's Max has in his head, if he's alongside someone, and if he's near, they have to jump out the way for him. That's the vibe I get from his interviews. He's like, he kept pushing me off. You look at the replay, Hamilton didn't change his line through one at all. He just put the car in a position where he had the line. And the rule is, if you have to be alongside, isn't it?
Yeah.
At no point in that first corner was Max alongside. His nose was about level with, I think, the middle of the car, but that doesn't dictate space. Like, at that point, you're on the outside of the corner, which then switches to the inside in the case of Monza. But I can't get my head around this mentality of, he never leaves me room. I was like, hang on, but what we've just seen was a mirror image of what happened at turn 4 on the first lap.
Yeah.
So how is that any different?
Yeah, I think the sort of the stuff Red Bull were saying back at Silverstone, they were working out who's ahead and stuff. You apply that to here, and as always, Hamilton had that corner. Yeah. Yes. If Verstappen ran a bit more wide going into the to the left hander of the chicane, then he may have been ahead. If he had have cut across the sausage curbs a bit, rather than not making any attempt whatsoever. If there was a genuine attempt to avoid Hamilton, if he knew there was going to be contact, Hamilton wasn't moving, and the position of Verstappen's car, it was straight on. That's why he went over the top of Hamilton. If he had have been attempting to move even a little bit to the left, even on board, just to turn left to avoid, and if it meant Hamilton got a time penalty or whatever for pushing him off, then fine. But he knew that his best chance now of maximising his chance of winning the title is to send both of them out.
Especially after the poor pit stop. I think
Yeah,
the poor pit stop will have been a red flag to a bull for Max. That would have really riled him up. And I think it would the thing with this like incident, and I think what we should refer to is the Bottas and Leclerc not coming together but overtake. So Bottas is on the inside, Leclerc's on the outside. Leclerc goes deep and tries to go the long way, doesn't achieve that and jumps over the sausage curb. He then lets Bottas back through and then gets right in his toe and he's overtaken him again by turn 4. Why couldn't Max have done that? And I think it's this rivalry is so strong, and this championship is going to come down to maybe points for fastest lap because it's that close. I just think, and it was what Jackie Stewart said. I think Max needs to mature, and it was Damon Hill as well. He just said he needs to know when to pick his fights because Hamilton is arguably one of the most respectful drivers on the grid. I know he's had a few comings together, but if if you've got Sebastian Vettel, Fernando Alonso, who are all world champions, saying, "Yeah, he's one of the he leaves the room, he doesn't push you off." If they're saying that, then to me it just comes down. I think Max just needs to pick his battles better. And I'm not a racing driver, so I don't know what's. But in my opinion, I think Max picks fights that 9 times out of 10 he will win because the other car will jump out the way. Hamilton has already shown him this year he's not prepared to do that on every occasion. We saw it at turn 4 in Monza. He did jump out the way. Here he didn't, and he had every right not to.
I think one thing that will be interesting to see is in a few years' time, whenever Russell and Norris really are battling for titles, is because they're sort of the same sort of group that grew up with Verstappen and racing. They're at times they can be slightly more aggressive. It'll be interesting to see how that works. Whether or not them, after racing against each other, growing up in the same sort of style of racing, will that make a difference? And I think I said this during the car on the way down that I just wish Hamilton was a couple of years younger because this would be one of the. I think it's shaping up to be an incredible rivalry, but this could be one of the best battles. This could easily go on for another 3-4 years, and if Hamilton's a couple of years younger, if this here was say a 10-year battle, it would be one of the best, definitely of modern times.
I don't think age is a problem Hamilton's worried about. I think he's arguably driving some of the best racing he's driven for a long time. And I think with the Russell and Norris, we've seen the underlying respect is there. We've seen Norris versus Hamilton. We saw it in Imola. And we've seen it at Monza. And we know Russell's a respectful, apart from when he's pulling, little stunts in the pit lane. But it was. Oh, I mean, we all would. But yeah, we've seen the underlying respect there. And for some reason, Verstappen doesn't seem to have that. It doesn't seem to be. He will do anything to win this title, no matter who he hits or who he takes off. And I'm not saying that as a Verstappen hater. That's just the mentality he has. It's a win or bust strategy. And it's interesting. It comes back to the point I mentioned last year when we were doing, I believe, the Christmas special. And I said, when Max is fighting for a title, his biggest strength will become his weakness. His biggest strength is his boldness, his moves, his elbows when he gets them out. And I think we're starting to see that this year. That style doesn't tend to win world championships.
No, it's gonna be an exciting end of the season, definitely between Hamilton and Verstappen, and we don't know how many more times they'll collide. But if both of them, all we want to see is the two of them racing against each other on track, having some great battles because we've been waiting so long for that, and it's happening. And we don't know next year the regulation changes whether or not it will continue. We'll just have to wait for that. But a team that a sort of finished off their great revival, McLaren 1-2, Daniel Ricciardo 1, Lando Norris 2nd. Craig, just how pleased were you to see McLaren back on the top step of the podium this weekend?
Oh, it's fantastic. And they did it on pure pace. There was no, oh, if Hamilton or Verstappen would have finished, they'd have won. It's like we don't know that because they were behind them. Danny Rick led start to finish, besides the pit stops. And I think that was to me the most. And the thing that amazed me is Norris on the radio. Guys, what do you want me to do? What's best for the team? That is a guy that knows his team. He knows where his eggs in his which basket his eggs are in. And it's just, I mean, you can't not like McLaren, and it's epic to see Ricciardo back on top. It's epic to see Norris up there with him, and it's epic to see McLaren back finally after all this time.
Yeah, I think, well, it was safe to say Andreas Seidel was one of the best appointments the team has made in recent years, maybe since Toto Wolff at Mercedes.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Yeah, I think he's done an incredible job since he's come in, and I think you have to look where McLaren were. They took a risk in bringing in Lando Norris when at the time people saying he wasn't ready. I know I said this a few times podcasts that Russell, Albon, Norris were all said they weren't ready to step up to Formula One, and you know, although Albon has missed this season, he's back next season. The three of them are quality drivers, and you're seeing Russell getting the Mercedes chance next season. Norris has been impressive since he joined the sport. He's constantly improving, and I think it's gone past the point where a Norris podium was a surprise to it's now something that we actually might expect to see in a weekend, because McLaren this season have been incredible, and I think what's helping them is they are being pushed by Ferrari as well, and they've got this bond. The team, it's when you think of Mercedes and Ferrari, you think of a big massive team. Whereas McLaren, although they're a massive car company, they still feel like a small group of people that are just love the sport. I think that's the way Zach Brown comes across to me. Anyway, you might disagree with that, Craig, but
It's just passion. I mean,
yeah,
it's something you don't. It's something that's hard and sometimes can get lost in all the politics of F1. But it's just fantastic to see McLaren back. It really is, and they deserve it after everything they've been through.
yeah. And do you think this is really what they needed to make all the pain from the last few years worth it to now potentially going into the next season be right up there taking the fight to Red Bull, Mercedes, whoever's going to be up there to potentially be challenging for a title?
I think they can be next year. I think the platform they'll have laid down this year is so solid and I think the regs as well, the regulation change will make a difference, and I think we will see McLaren up there this year, no, next year, sorry, and I think they could genuinely be contenders for the title.
I think if Ricciardo he's been improving this season. He obviously struggled at the start, but the last few rounds he has been quite impressive. I reckon if he can keep this form up now for the rest of the season, McLaren will definitely be in the constructors battle, and I think it was telling that they didn't switch Norris and Ricciardo around. That they knew that the team championship will mean more to them than Norris finishing third in the championship, because their battles against Ferrari for that third place, and Norris knows that, and he's proven that he can play the team game, and down the line that will be repaid. It could be
100%.
Say it comes to Abu Dhabi and Ricciardo's ahead of him. Norris needs 1 point to claim third. I'd say the team would probably switch. Ricciardo would give up a podium for that, because I think Norris probably could have outpaced Ricciardo during the race if it's just them two fighting up front. It's a tough one to know.
I don't think he would have done, because I think you saw that pace Ricciardo had in his bag on that last lap, that fastest lap they set on the last lap.
No, that's true. He wasn't really pushing that much towards the end. He saved up for that. Well, another strong weekend for Valtteri. Well, another strong weekend. One of a few strong weekends recently for Valtteri Bottas, and it just so happens that he has lost his Mercedes seat going to Alfa Romeo next season. Craig, just very quickly, just your reaction to Bottas moving to Alfa Romeo, and of course George Russell moving to Mercedes. Obviously Williams score points with Russell with ninth place, but what do you make of both their weekends?
Well, I think Bottas's weekend arguably was one of the best I've seen from him in his Mercedes career. Well, I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I do. It was impressive throughout, and I think if he didn't have to take a penalty to the back of the grid, he probably would have been up there, maybe in the podium. I don't think he would have had the pace to win the race. He obviously relied on Perez getting the penalty to get onto the podium, but it was one of his better weekends, and it's just disappointing for him that it had to come the weekend after he lost a seat for next season.
Well, I think it's, if anything, that's the best time to have it, because it will reassure him that he can do it. And I think the thing with Valtteri is now the pressure's not there. I think we could see him have a completely different second half of the season. And dare I make a brave accusation and say I wouldn't rule him out of the title battle just yet. Okay. I think if Max and Lewis continue to trip over each other, and he's the one that's there to pick up the pieces with this newfound form, if he can maintain it, there's no reason why he's not going to close down that gap.
It would definitely be an interesting one to see, but it is entirely possible. It's something around 80 odd points, and Norris isn't even far behind either. To get,
no, he's not.
I think he's like further 10 points or something behind.
Something like that, because he only overtook him last race, I think.
I mean, I'm all up for a Bottas Norris championship battle towards the end of the season. If having Verstappen want to keep having their little scraps, be quite interesting. George Russell then scoring points. Well, if Hamilton and Verstappen keep having these little battles, do you think there's any way Mercedes might decide, you know what, actually Valtteri will bring you back?
In place of who?
Hamilton?
Nah,
not happening.
No way. There's your clickbait title anyway.
Exactly.
So.
That was the plan.
No, I can't. I think I'm so excited for next year's Mercedes driver lineup.
Yeah,
it's one of the best on the grid.
Proper Team GB stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing Hamilton, Norris and Russell all on the podium, Silverstone. That would be quite incredible.
Oh, can you imagine? Silverstone would erupt.
Yeah, it actually will be quite interesting to see next year the balance between Mercedes and McLaren merchandise, because there's a lot more McLaren stuff this year than usual. So if Russell, it would be interesting to see who the fans would be supporting, because you have 3 great British drivers fighting for titles, which would be quite interesting to see. But there's been some news that's come out the last few days, and that is Formula One are looking to bring in young drivers as a make them compulsory for Friday practice for at least one session. Just very quickly, Craig, do you think that's a good idea? Is it the right way to go forward, or will it just become which young drivers got the most amount of money to pay for a team to get a seat?
Well, hopefully it won't be which young drivers got the most money, but I think it's a great idea. Why not? I mean, that's what free practice is for, and we need to see more of these younger drivers. And I think it's a fantastic idea. Just bringing them. Say every team has to one younger driver on a Friday. Why not?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see which drivers the team picks, because Williams got likes of Jamie Chadwick and stuff that definitely deserve chances. It'll be interesting to see how strict they are, because we all know from the young drivers test, Renault ran Alonso last year, Alfa Romeo ran Kubica. I hope teams don't get around it that way, and say if a driver hasn't been racing for 2 years, because you see Hulkenberg and the Aston Martin and stuff, I think that would be quite unfair. But I also wouldn't like to see the likes of Roy Nissany paying his way for the Williams seat, for every session, keeping the likes of Chadwick or Jack Aitken back. It would be quite unfair.
But then you've got the argument is Jack Aitken a young driver?
Well, he's a Grand Prix driver, technically, so of
Yeah,
interest.
this is one of those things that it could be 1,001 ways to fold a piece of
Yeah,
paper.
because for Haas, Pietro, no, is it? Yeah, Pietro Fittipaldi. He's done 2 races, but he.
Yep.
Although, what was it? Always the thing. The back of the cars had a different light for during testing. It was you're rookie until you do your 2 races or something like that. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see if they apply that. But I think we'll move on to our predictions very quickly for the Russian Grand Prix. At the Sochi Autodrome. I think this is the final race there for a while, or is it 2023? They're moving somewhere.
It's 2023, I think.
Okay, so 2 more races there. This is of course Ryan's favorite track, so you can put what you think of the circuit in the comments below for him to see, because I think he's the only person that I know that actually likes the circuit. But yeah, the points we got last time were not great at all. I got 1 point for putting Bottas third on the podium, and I got half a point for my wildcard prediction, putting Russell in the points, and Ryan got half a point for putting Lance Stroll in the top 7. So that means it is 16 points to me and 19.5 for you and Ryan, Craig. So you still got a bit of a lead, but still plenty to play in this season. But yeah, I think we're going to end this podcast here. Any final thoughts ahead of the Russian Grand Prix, Craig?
No, not. Are we going to do the predictions?
We are actually, yes. I completely forgot about that.
I got a little confused there.
Yeah, we have to do the predictions. Yeah, that's a very good call. You know the podcast format better than me, and I've been on 21 now. Okay, right. It's normal format again this time, isn't it? It's
no sprint
so
shenanigans.
it saves the hassle of sprint quality predictions. So qualifying, pole position.
Pole, Bottas.
Okay.
He usually runs well here.
Okay, I'm gonna go for Hamilton.
Yeah, I can see that happening as well.
Your race winner.
Bottas.
Okay. I'm gonna go Hamilton.
Yeah, I'll stick with my guns.
Okay. Podium. You can't put Bottas on the second and third place. By the way, you have to pick 2 different drivers.
I'm gonna say Hamilton and. Oh, it depends if Max takes engine penalties.
Well, that is true.
I'm going to say Norris.
Okay, I'm going to be very bold for my predictions. I'm going to go for Hamilton, Leclerc, and Gasly.
No, that's very bold.
Yeah. It's still possible though.
I mean, weirder things have happened.
Yeah. And fastest lap.
Fastest lap, Max Verstappen. Yeah, Verstappen.
I'm gonna go Gasly. Why not? And then wildcard prediction.
Wildcard prediction. Mazepin and Schumacher not to hit each other during the race.
Yes, this is a good one actually. I'm gonna go for 2 actually. Tsunoda to get into Q3, and Russell to finish in the top 7.
Yeah, they're good.
A little bit on the definitely wildcard predictions. Don't really know how possible they're gonna be. So I'll get it right this time. Any final thoughts ahead of the Russian Grand Prix?
No, I think we've covered most of it. I think I'm just looking forward to seeing how this championship battle unfolds.
Yeah, it should be definitely exciting, and if these two can provide a great battle for the rest of the season, given what we've been through the last 2 years, it will just like all the restrictions work well from Formula One, and as they open it up, obviously more opportunities will come, and I think the events are getting better with more and more fans are getting in as well. So it'll be exciting end of the season. There's no race this weekend, but the Russian Grand Prix is the following weekend, or if it's even going to be called the Russian Grand Prix. I know there's no anthem or flag allowed, so it'll be interesting to see. But we've had a British driver win the British Grand Prix. We've had a Belgian-born driver win the Belgian Grand Prix. A Dutch driver won the Dutch Grand Prix. So a Russian driver won the Russian Grand Prix. Is that possible?
I mean, if it does, I'll eat my hat.
Okay. I should put down my wildcard prediction for Daniel Kvyat to replace Fernando Alonso this weekend to claim a surprise win. Yeah. So yeah, Craig, thank you for joining me once again for this podcast. And thank you to everyone for listening. And we'll hope you join us next time for a recap of the Russian Grand Prix. Goodbye.
Goodbye.